Healthy, happy water. 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 You're the one.
I love this picture of you, Tina.
Look at I have
Oh my!
I have folds in my.
You are
look
so
at the,
cute. Look at this. Isn't she cute?
Look at the fat. Look at the fat in this
Well, you love Mama's milk. Look at that.
But I've got dimples. I've got dimples
I
in
know, it's just
my
really-
elbows. I'm so fat.
What did John call you?
He called me
Two-ton tuna.
two-ton tuna. Oh,
From a
she's
Tuna's-ville.
two-ton tuna from
Tuna's-ville.
Tuna's-ville. She drinks beer up in the hill. That's two-ton tuna from Tuna's-ville. That's tuna.
Tuna bowl. My memories of growing up in Billings, Montana, or Bozeman, Montana, were just, they were happy times. You know, when we were kids, we were well cared for, we were loved.
There aren't any pictures of their wedding.
No. My father was from Little Rock, Arkansas. My mother was from Mankato, Kansas. She was an employee in the store that my father was a manager of. And they fell in love and got married. They were looking for an opportunity, and they felt there was a greater opportunity in Bozeman, Montana than any place they'd been. I'll never forget the story that my mother told. They had made the decision to open a store in Bozeman. They had leased this space on Main Street. They loaded up their entire inventory, the opening inventory, in the car, and then our father had rented a trailer that was attached to the car. And they were driving across Wyoming, you know, going all of maybe 45 miles an hour in their old Ford car. It was winter, and it was cold, and it was snowy, and the heater didn't work all that well. And my mother was pregnant with me. She looked at my father and she said, I thought he was crazy. Somehow the trailer kind of fishtailed and turned over.
Oh, I do remember that.
And my mother was certain that this is a horrible idea and it just cannot work. And, you know, this is surely a sign from God that we should not do this.
We need to turn around.
And, you know, our father, he was a strong guy. He set the trailer upright and reattached it to the car. And he said, Eileen, everything is going to be okay. And, you know, the inventory was still in the boxes and nothing was damaged. And they drove on to Bozeman, opened their store.
You just look like you're not quite all here.
What am I wearing that dress for? That can't be me.
That can't be me. I don't wear
Yeah,
dresses
they have me in a dress, no.
and booties. Look at what a cute little kid you are.
And look at the proud big brother saddling up to his little sister.
Look at the size of that pram. It looks a little like a dump truck, doesn't it?
Well, and look at this picture, Tina, the way we were dressed. And you're all dressed up with your little dress and bonnet, and it looks like a little flower in your hair. And here I am in
A suit.
shorts. Yeah, suit.
A
Short
suit.
jacket and a hat. Very stylish.
Very stylish.
Oh, well, they were in the apparel business, and
Yeah.
I guess that,
It was
you know,
important.
yeah, it's important to dress well. Oh, isn't that a sweet little picture?
That's first day of school.
Oh,
Look
Tina.
at I have.
And
And I have
you've
that
even
fancy
got a hat on.
I
First day of school, wearing a hat,
To
all dressed
McKinley
up.
Oh. This is a cute picture of Mother and Daddy, don't you think?
Yeah, they look very happy together there. I think our mom is kind of showing her love, her adoration for our father. I mean, there was a wonderful, wonderful, loving relationship between them in those years.
Uh-huh.
They loved music. Yeah, they would roll up the carpet and dance. Do you remember how they loved to dance?
God, yes.
You know, and in those days, you know, it was a Victrola.
Do you remember Daddy used to go to the country club and play cards?
Mm-hmm.
The next morning, we'd go downstairs and he would have a money shower.
Yeah,
and
all
he'd
of-
throw up coins.
Yeah, all of the coins would be tossed in the air, and we'd scramble for them.
And if he'd had a good night, they had dimes and quarters.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think that was a tradition that he learned from his father.
Yeah, I do. This is a picture of my father's family. And we would have to go down to Little Rock once a year, at least. Remember the Alexanders had the plantation? And that we would go down and chase the peacocks? You know, we were from Montana. We didn't know
We'd
anything.
never seen a peacock. I mean, there were no such birds
Oh, God.
in our part of the world.
And John and I went out,
Just little kids.
little kids, and we were just fascinated. You can pull a peacock's tail feathers out if you can chase one fast enough, and then you step on the feather, and they are keep going. So John and I collected.
Yeah, we collected a few feathers.
Oh, God, we had so much fun. But it was like going to a different part of the world.
They used to call Dad John the Joiner because he was involved in so many public work efforts. I mean, how to make this a better town, a better place for all. And he was always there to join in. You know, our mother had a generous spirit. Money meant nothing to her.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she
It was
just,
something you spent.
yeah, I got an extra buck. Let's have a
go.
party.
Yeah, let's go out and have an ice cream.
But, you know, money didn't mean anything to our mother. It did to our father in the sense that because you have some money, you can do some good things for people, for the community. I remember my mother and father, as well as my grandmother, the one we lived with in Little Rock, they would always discuss politics. Because of listening to those conversations and being a part of all that, I knew at some point in time I'd like to be in the legislature. I'd like to be able to be there to advocate for the common good. One thing that made a difference, on Montana Avenue, there were always these young prostitutes. And these were young girls that would come to town from the small towns around. You know, they'd been abused by their father or their uncle or the family friend. And they just had to get away from that horrible environment. And they'd come to Billings. You know, they have no money, they have no income, they have no job skills. And there are always these pimps around that would hit on them. So I brought forward a bill that would make it a felony to be a pimp. The homosexual population were judged to be, this is criminal and deviant behavior. We should have laws against. And I said, you know, that's wrong. God had simple instructions. He said, love one another. Don't judge one another. Love one another. My first session, a kid was stabbed at Billings Senior High School, and a pistol was discharged in the parking lot at Skyview High School. Present law provided nothing, really. How do we deal with things like that? Yeah, the stabbing, yeah, we have laws that deal with that. But rather than get the kid involved, you know, in the court system, let's get him some help. The NRA thought that I was infringing upon their Second Amendment rights.
Oh.
I did get that bill passed, but not in the first session. I've really enjoyed having a seat at the table. I did some good things, and I'm really glad I had that opportunity. I think our father really, we inherited our value system from him. We inherited from him this sense of community responsibility, this sense of social justice. I think these photographs really do a wonderful job of capturing his personality, his gentle spirit, his kind of loving and giving way.
Look at
mother
them.
and father.
This is our mother and father up at the cabin.
Yeah.
Mother's on her best behavior.
Yeah. I'll never forget, we would spend the summer up there. And I must have been 10 years old or 11 years old. Our father would come up on the weekends. And our mother, you know, when he'd leave, I mean, she'd just start drinking. She wasn't abusive. She just was an alcoholic. Didn't get around to feeding us. And, you know, I took her on. As a 10-year-old would tell his mother, this is child abuse. But I didn't know exactly how to express it, but I did let her know. I know our father's coming. It's Saturday. He's coming, and I'm leaving. And I'm going to meet him on the highway. And I'm going to tell him how you treated us. And so, you know, it's a gravel road, and I walked, probably 5 miles or so down the highway. And here, I could see our dad driving up the highway, and he saw this kid there, and son, what's going on? I told him. And I didn't stay there anymore after that.
When you left, I think Daddy only came up one time and said, we're all going.
Yeah.
I didn't
And
want
then after our father died, which was not long after that, she sold the cabin.
Look at how cute you are.
Oh, look how cute you are. Looks like we just finished a bowl of popcorn. Our dad looks very happy there.
He looks relaxed.
Yeah. Big bottle of booze.
I remember that shirt. It's a wool shirt.
Yeah.
Our life changed dramatically at age 10.
My mother and father had purchased a new Ford convertible. Remember, it was blue in color.
Yeah.
And they thought, well, wouldn't it be fun to go to New Orleans for Mardi Gras? And so their friends, the Bringlesons, joined them. And the four of them drove to New Orleans. And that's where our father got sick. Bring drove the car home, and they flew to Rochester to go to the Mayo Clinic. At that time, nobody knew what leukemia was, and they had no way of treating it. Right off the dining room, there was like a little
That alcove,
den.
yeah.
They set up a bed in there, a hospital bed, and he lived there for a short while. And then when his condition worsened, he had to go back to the hospital.
I'll never forget. John and I would get to go visit him every day, and we'd go about 5. And he always looked just great. I had had a piano recital. I had played Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, and I was so proud of myself because I made it through without a hitch. And so we got home, and Mother had to go off someplace, and you had gone off someplace. So I just decided I would scamper up to the hospital. So I ran up there, and I snuck in the back stairwell. And I waited until there wasn't a nurse around, and I sneaked down and I popped into Daddy's room. And I'll never forget it, because he was absolutely gray, just lying there, just out of it. And that's when I realized that every day he had gotten a transfusion just before we came, so that he was always rosy and he was sitting up. I remember how absolutely furious I was that they had tricked us.
Of course, his passing was the saddest event of my life, you know, until my wife Betty died. They knew he was dying, and they suggested to my mother that, you know, you should probably get John out of town because, you know, his father's going to die any day now. We want to spare him the you know, the sorrow and the grief of that death experience. So a couple of men took myself and Jim and Marty Coddington and his father were there, and they took us to Hebgen Lake to fish. I had no idea my father was so gravely ill and would soon die. Every night they would call to see how my father was doing, and they said, he's going to die today, and so you better get John home to be with his mother and his sister. They didn't say your father's dying, they just said, well, fishing's not that good, we're going to go home. And I understand things like that. And so we're driving to Columbus and we stop in the drugstore there. Dr. Martz called. He came back to the car and he said, well, John, your dad died. And I said, God, what do you mean my father died? I mean, I was just, I was so disappointed and so angry that I couldn't just hold my father.
Yeah, that was shitty. That was just, I'm with you. And they didn't tell me either that Daddy was so gravely ill.
Yeah, we just,
you know,
our father was...
I wanted to be there with it when he died.
I wanted to hold him in my arms.
Yeah. Well, I woke up with Father Mizuta, he was the priest at our church. He's a Korean that was... he was a Norwegian, his one parent was Korean and the other parent was Norwegian. So he was this great big tall, very Asian looking man. And I woke up and he is sitting on the edge of my bed. And he is the one that told me that my father had died. And with that I got out of bed and I went into my closet and I closed the door. And I sat down in the far end of my closet, put all my clothes around me. And Mother was downstairs. There must have been already 50 people in our house. And then a party began. I mean, the drinking, the smoking, the eating. So I went outside and I waited on the curb outside until John came. It was the worst day of my life, just the pits. But then, John and I kind of made a decision that we weren't going to cave, that we were not going to have this ruin our life. And I kind of remember the two of us talking and sort of deciding that, no, we're going to stay together, and this is not going to be the end of our life. We're going to live out a good life, a noble life with purpose.
Wow.
It was lousy. But, we don't get to choose those things.
After our father died, our mother was terribly depressed and she drank too much and her life was out of control. She'd go off on a toot.
Lucid. And that went on for years. John was the gentle one. John was the one that when Mother was drunk, he could go over and put his arm around her and say, come on, Mom, it's time for you to go to bed. Mother never had an engagement ring from our father, so John and I decided that Mother needed a diamond ring. So we saved up our money and we went down and bought her a diamond ring for her Christmas present that year. But then I think the court got a little anxious about the fact that they're just these two kids that just keep living on their own. We're really supposed to be wards of the state. That's when they wanted to send us off. You were going to go to Shattuck and I was going to go to St. Mary's.
Yeah.
And so remember we went down and spoke to the judge, said we don't want to do that. We don't want to be separated. We're going to live as we have been and be with each other. We don't want to be separated.
Our grandmother really saved our life. You know, we were provided a loving home.
Yeah.
You know, I was 15 years old then. You were 13. And I was raised in hell. You know, I was going to be sent to a foster home, and you were too. And our grandmother, who was then probably 75 or 80 years old, said, "My children are not going to go to a foster home. They're going to come live with me." And she lived in Little Rock, Arkansas. So when school was out, we loaded all of our things in the family Ford. And this was 1952, and before the interstate highway was built. And I drove us to Little Rock, Arkansas. And
except when we got to Joplin, Missouri.
I wanted to kill you.
I said, "No, John, you're going the wrong way. You're supposed to turn right." And he's, Dina, I'm
was
driving.
right. She was right.
So with that, I said it again, and he leaned over right across me like this and opened the door, and then he took his foot and went like this, and he shoved me out of the car onto the ground and drove off.
Came
And
back for her.
I did. Oh, honey, not immediately. I must have had to wait 15 or 20 minutes. And at first I was just laughing. I thought it was a lark. And after 15 minutes, I was fighting back tears. I didn't have my handkerchief. I didn't have my pocketbook. I didn't have anything. And when he drove up, I did not say a word. I just opened the door, got in, and leaned over and gave him a kiss, and all was well. I'll never forget, though, one time you came home early from work.
Oh, this is funny. The highway construction project was shut down. I came home, the front door was locked. I didn't have a key, so I crawled up on the second floor balcony. Our grandmother was sitting there in her chair by the window where the light was better, and she had her magnifying glass and she was reading. I knock on the window, and I said, "Would you let me in, Graham?" And she, "Well, hello, son." Like, this is the way you always do it.
This is the way you always come home.
Oh, it was
Oh,
funny.
that was so fun.
I started my freshman year in college at University of Colorado in Boulder. And our mother went off on a toot, and Tina was home all alone. So I quit school and came home to be with Tina. She's a high school senior, and she's doing all the cooking for us, and we're living there. And we were invited out for Thanksgiving dinner. Well, I brought home from the University of Colorado some very, very
Grain alcohol.
grain alcohol. And so we thought we'd have a couple of cocktails before dinner. And we were both, we started drinking, I think about,
Which was purple passion.
yeah.
Grape juice and grain alcohol.
And we, sit here, and we were still in our pajamas, just drunk, and we were feeling sorry for ourselves.
Yeah, we were really kind
oh,
of.
jeez, look at you,
Poor us.
poor orphan kids. and at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Bud and Doris came over to get us, to take us out there, and we're still sitting there.
Crying in our jammies.
Just crying. And
Oh, God, that was embarrassing.
so we showered and shaved, got dressed.
Did we go? I thought we passed.
No, we went.
We went.
We went, yeah.
Could we sober up enough that we
Well,
didn't embarrass ourselves?
we'd quit drinking. I mean, we drank it all. It was only.
Oh, God. But John was so sweet. Mother had been committed to a hospital. And so John said, it's important for you to finish high school where you are. So the court was going to send me off to someplace and let me finish my senior year. And John said, no, you're going to we're going to live together right here.
Yeah.
So,
So
you went to
I
Eastern.
went to Eastern Montana College and finished my freshman year there.
But, oh, God, that was just, that was funny. That was so sweet of you.
Oh.
Aw, shucks. We had several adventures with me being the head of the kitchen. One time, it was in the summertime, and John was working.
I was working at, it was the worst job I've ever had in my life. I got a job at the brick factory, hardest work I've ever done.
Oh, God.
And Tina would make a lunch for me and put it in my lunchbox, and I'd go to work. And Tina and I had an argument.
Well, no, it's just that I just didn't have anything else. Well, you came home and you complained about that meatloaf sure tasted strange. And that's when I just decided to fess up, and I said, well, that wasn't meatloaf, that was dog food.
Yeah.
And he decked me.
No, I didn't.
You did.
No,
I hit the floor.
No, I did. I've never hit you. Never in my life.
Well, maybe
I wouldn't hit a woman.
You wouldn't hit a woman.
Hell no.
Not even your sister.
No, no.
Well,
I
anyway.
might throw you out of the car,
But
but I wouldn't hit you. I wouldn't hit you.
Anyway,
No.
somehow I ended up on the floor.
You must have fainted.
John at one time was dating a woman who lived in Galveston. This was Kathleen.
Bridget Agnes McCarthy. Oh, I loved that girl. She was just so sweet.
Yeah. Well, she would come up, but the 10 pounds of shrimp would
Precede her.
precede her. So when the 10 pounds of shrimp arrived, we would
She's
get
coming.
ready for our luau, and we made this grass shack. Everybody got dressed up in costume. We made Mai Tai cocktails or something.
Oh, yeah, we all got drunk.
awful.
Yeah, it's really interesting when I came back to Billings and eventually went to work in the family business, how my relationship changed with our mother. I began to see her as a very bright, very creative person.
Well, she was an amazing woman.
Oh, she was.
One thing she really did for us, John, is she showed us how to die.
Yes,
You know,
she did.
Mother was diagnosed with bladder cancer. When she was in the hospital, at the end, she called all of her grandchildren.
Yeah.
She called all your kids. She called Tony and she called Ellison. And she hung up.
She said goodbye.
She said goodbye to Ellison. And she went into a coma.
You know, it was really interesting. She, in that conversation with each of her grandchildren, she said, now, I want you to have something of mine. What would you like? Now, talk about the hand of God. We saw it.
Oh, God.
You know, she had a lot of nice things. And clearly, you know, they all can't have this wonderful glass if she only had one. But they all chose different things. I mean, there were 8 kids to divide her things, and nobody chose the same thing.
Not a single duplication.
Yeah.
Well, and then remember, she stayed in kind of a coma for several days.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, Fred, he decided he could come home. So he flew from Istanbul to Billings, and he walked in the door and he said, "Mama B." And with that, she sat bolt upright and out of a coma. And she said, "Fred, you're here." Smiled and died.
Yeah.
It was just, it just shows you that we're all really a little bit more in charge of our going out, I think, than we like to give credit for. Well, we've had a wonderful, rich life, John.
Oh, yeah. Oh,